On this episode of Postcards.
I want my story to be told. I know I'm incredibly lucky. I also know that there's more kids like me even in my community.
What I was trying to write into with the book is the concept that even being alive participates in some kind of destruction, and that destruction is renewal.
As a kid growing up watching the piano, it was like a ghost was playing the piano. You know, it's very captivating and very magical, and I really feel that in a way pianos are living, breathing things.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage-funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits, 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.
Hamatakiapi, Tylar Larsen of Makiapi Do. Hello, my relatives. My name is Tylar Larsen. I'm from Chanshayapi, or Lower Sioux. The traditional name for Lower Sioux is Chanshayapi. It is where they paint the trees red. Lower Sioux is not a term that we like, really. It's not a word that we ever said. In the Dakota way of life, women are sacred. They're incredibly important. They are the only people that can bring life onto the earth. We've always thought of them as higher beings, but in modern society, in the society that we live in today, you don't see that as much. You see them getting put down and thought of as lesser, and I really don't like that. All of the women that I know are so powerful and so strong. And I wanted to show that in a painting, I guess. So I painted a depiction of a Dakota woman kind of facing forward, and she is holding earth in her hands, dirt, sand, whatever you want to refer to it as. And that sand is trickling through her fingers. So she's kind of like Unchi Maka, Grandmother Earth, and she has that power holding in her hand. And it shows how she can just drop it, and she doesn't have to continue to do these things, but she still does. She's just standing there, being a Dakota woman, showing all the strength and the power that she has. I'm female to male transgender, and I didn't come out until I was 12 or 14. Before then, I never wanted to do anything. I was always just in my room alone. I never wanted to go to events. I never wanted to go to dinners. I just stayed home. When I realized things were different, and I told my dad about it, that's when I was really able to start being involved in my community and going to events and feeling okay with it and enjoying it instead of just being fearful the whole time. It's always scary. There's always the fear. Like, I was gonna tell my dad at this one specific park, and then we walked all the way through the park and I still never said anything, and I was terrified. That's the only thing that was going through my mind, and he thought I was just like wanted to go on a walk with him, so he didn't know what was happening. When I finally told him, I could not breathe. It was incredibly scary. But then he was very accepting, he took kind of just a minute in silence, just kind of thinking about it, and then said, okay. I know that people like me have always existed in especially Native American cultures. We've always been there and we have been accepted. You know, I hear things about two-spirited people. I personally have not been able to talk to too many elders about that to know enough, but my grandpa, he's an elder in our community, and his only words to me were, "You know who you are." It's interesting because I know of many other people who they don't get accepted the way I was. And I couldn't be more thankful. I want my story to be told. I know I'm incredibly lucky. I also know that there's more kids like me even in my community. You know, they can always come to me and talk to me about things like that, and that's great. In one of my art classes, we had to make coil pots. So, you know, rolling out some clay and then wrapping it around, and then we could either just smooth it out and make it a container, or we could sculpt it a little bit. And I sculpted it to look like a body. On one side, it's a female body. You know, it has wider hips and it has breasts. And then on the other side, instead of the breasts, there's the scars that would be like top surgery scars. You know, my art teacher was very interested in what I was making. Then she fired it in the kiln, and you know, I had glazed it and everything, and it cracked. But it only cracked in one small spot, and that was across where the heart would be on the female side. You know, at first thought, I was like, oh no, my art's ruined, oh my God. But you know, now the more I think about it, it is really cool the way that it just happened to crack in that one spot. Everywhere else, it still looks exactly how I made it. So this did not work as I expected it to, but that's okay. Yeah, now I'm just trying to make it more even because I didn't expect this to be this big, and I already used up one of these and I only bought two. So last summer, the summer of 2018, I went to the Oscar Howe Summer Art Institute, which is like an art camp for Native American students. It changed everything art related to me. We were able to talk to so many awesome Indigenous artists. They were able to teach us, or we just got to speak to them for a lecture. One artist that really changed my outlook on art was Chinupa Hanska Luger. He was the artist in residence while we were there. He said to us, art is a verb, it's an action. You are making art. Art is not the final product. You need to worry about enjoying the process and not worrying about the final product. And that's when everything kind of switched around for me, and I just worried about enjoying what I was making. I'm incredibly lucky to have the community that I have and the family that I have. They've never once thought different of me. Even when I came out to my dad, he just said, okay, when are we going to tell Grandma and Grandpa? Like, there was no, like, are you sure? He was just, okay, let's go. That was kind of shocking. You always hear scary stories. I guess it comes down to really knowing who your family is and who your community is. And my whole community has been changing with me. I still have to correct them sometimes. That's how it's always going to be, because they've known me since I was little. That's just how it goes. But they've all been incredibly accepting, and it's all been more amazing than I ever could have asked for.
I'm a poet and a writer. In addition to writing poetry, I also write essays about my experience living in rural Minnesota, and I regularly committed to writing in about 2014. My poetry really relies heavily, I think, on what I would call a mix between the inner landscape and the natural world. And so it's a way I understand my own human experience and what it means to be human in our contemporary context that's riddled with conflict. And so it's this weird tension that I try to write into that talks about the joy of life and also its absolute anguish, our vulnerability, the risk of being human and who we hurt just by being alive, and at the same time the blessing of being alive is what I try to capture in my poems. Last summer, you taught my son to carve a spoon. He asked, "Granddad, does wood bleed?" For the way you didn't panic, thanks. Answered, "No, but you do," and explained, "The knife can be too sharp to feel it." Held my son's bleeding palm in your hand, told him to think each move before he moved it, to check his small fingers, the blank, his round leg, where the blank rests, and breathe. I know you meant the lesson for my son. Dad, the world is too sharp for me to feel it. Teach me to strike deep with the tolkniv until I find the soft wood under the birch bark to push away from the hand. Tell me to check my heart, chest where the heart rests, and breathe. Say no hurry. Say be silent. And together we'll stay by the campfire while jaybirds call in the maple trees. Then, when I am calm, I'll remember to pay attention that I may feel the wound. The scarred hand carves a good spoon. My chapbook's called Animals I Have Killed, and it's not really animals I have killed, but my husband, rather, because I don't know if I would be able to handle doing it. But the concept of the poem is, before I moved to this area, I had a really idyllic understanding of like being out on a farm, being in the countryside, and like everybody just gets along fabulously, and the animals are almost like a Disney movie or something. They like talk to one another and they sing beautiful songs in the morning. And then when I got out here, things kept happening every day where I was totally immersed in this cycle of life and death. And I thought, this is not the ideal place I thought it was going to be. It's saturated with violence and despair and turmoil. And so what I was trying to write into with the book is the concept that even being alive participates in some kind of destruction. And at the same time, in that destruction is renewal. Animals I have killed. The fox that ate our chickens, bullet and rifle and didn't run. Under the woodshed, woodchuck, rifle and ran. 2 raccoons and shot through the softening, rifle again, but first tried to trap. Chicken, the dog injured but didn't kill, bare hands and neck snapped. Our dog, she slipped under the front wheel of our truck. Impact. Do the goats we take to the butcher count? Slaughtered. Pheasants so many I don't keep track. Hunted and stewed. Deer, deer season, hunted and shot, processed and ground and sausage and jerky, mounted. The skunk when we got home from Dairy Queen, rifle again and didn't run again, a kitten, car again, impact again, and also crushed. And I imagined it was only sleeping. The rooster, burned alive for attacking my son. At the farm, I confess, I find no peace for wild things. Why God spoke breath and dust, chaos and light of thousands, suns, am I steward, dare he call me beloved? Martha Graham, who's a modern dancer, says, one does not become a dancer, one is chosen. And I sort of feel like that about poetry. If I could choose another art form, I would have. And it's almost like an aspect of my personhood that won't leave me alone. And I tried to make it leave me alone for a very long time. If I could have convinced it to leave me alone, I would not have become a poet. So I wish I could have been something, I don't know, less obnoxious, let's say, less obnoxious than a poet. I also think to deny it is just trying to hide from that part of myself. So yeah, that's the long answer. It chose me.
The player piano is one of the first ways people were getting recorded piano music in their home. They're a regular piano, but they also, as they say, have an extra set of fingers. So you can play them regularly, but also you can put in the paper roll and then get the recording by the original performer. So we are at my family cabin in Richmond, Minnesota, and this is our family piano. It's been in the family since my mom and uncles were kids. My grandparents would have dance parties in the basement. My uncles would pump the piano, and they'd get little tips here on the side of the piano. People would give them some money for pumping. This piano is a Packard built by the same company that made the cars, and it was made in 1918, and it's really a well-built piano, which is nice because they're not all created equal. I think my grandpa and uncles refinished it sometime in the 50s or 60s, and it turned out pretty good. About 10 years ago, I took it on to repair it. The player system inside had kind of given up the ghost, and I refurbished it and got it going again. I certainly didn't have much of an idea what I was getting into when I tore into this. I was working as a mechanic at the time, but before I started on this one, I thought, okay, this is a family heirloom. I could potentially wreck it. So I got a piano online for cheap and kind of learned some of the techniques on that. That way, in case I wrecked it, I wasn't going to ruin the family heirloom. I met a man who had a shop in Minneapolis named Donald Barton, and he eventually took me on part-time after I got this one going and saw I had the knack, or I was, I guess you could say, the right kind of crazy to have the fortitude to go through one of these. And I worked part-time with him for about 7 or 8 years and really came to enjoy the work. It's a neat mix of mechanical engineering and woodworking and a little bit of history and of course working with antiques and the music aspect of it. And I liked all those disciplines coming together into one trade. Between the late teens and to the mid-20s, over 85% of pianos being sold in the US were player pianos. Over 1 million were made back in the 10s and 20s, so it was a lot. I'm imagining there's quite a few left, and I would say the majority of them don't work. A lot of them are getting thrown away, which is too bad, but I already have 5 or 6 of my own. I can't save them all, but at least I can save some parts to use them in future restorations and help get other pianos going again. So we are in Anoka, which is the Halloween capital of the world. It's not very well advertised, but we do our best. I grew up watching the Munsters, so I was always fascinated by things a little off-putting and a little macabre. I bought the hearse about 9 years ago and have been working on it here and there. I drive it around in the fall, around the Halloween capital of the world here, and I get a big kick out of it. Yeah, I'm confident that this thing turns more heads than a Corvette. I mean, it's like a train wreck, really. You can't not look. See, look at that guy's actually stopped walking. He stopped walking and he's looking at it. How you doing? I've been in business just a year now, and I've got nearly 100 customers, which may not sound like much when you're a coffee shop, but when you're working on pianos, to me that's a lot. I've got a backlog of a few months of work, and I'm surrounded by pianos that I'm working on, so that's keeping me busy. I'm 29 years old, and oftentimes I'll get a call from a customer. They haven't met me, and they'll schedule a house call, and then I show up at their door and they say, "Whoa, I thought you were gonna be an old man." I tell them that I'm working on that, but not there yet. Every restoration job is different, every repair is different, so perfecting it is kind of what keeps me going. Each job is just leading on to the next one. As I am tearing into the piano and opening it up to do the restoration work, I uncover so many things like handwriting, when it was tuned last, tunings going back to the 20s, finding people's signatures people I'll never know, gold stickers from kids' sheet music, taking lessons and finding toys, and there's the other end of that, finding dead mice, all sorts of things. I really get to know them rather intimately, whether I like it or not. I've been interested in welding ever since I was, maybe 14 or so years old, and was always tinkering in my parents' garage, and have been doing a lot of art sculptures out of found materials, and have been populating my garden with pieces that I made over the years. And I've sold some, but generally just do it for fun. The garden in my backyard, I put in maybe 5 or so years ago just to have plants around my sculpture, just to kind of make it look a little more at home. But I've really enjoyed gardening and have been more interested in native plants, and it's really filled in. Working for myself has been really nice. It's allowed me to have time to do my art and work in my garden, and also be able to do something that I really enjoy and kind of set my own path on that to a degree. as I start my own business and enter out on my own. As a kid growing up watching the piano, it was like a ghost was playing the piano. It's very captivating and very magical, and I think that sense of wonder that instills has really stuck with me. And I do see that with a lot of the customers when they bring in a piano that they grew up with. Once I get a piano going, there's a sense of revival, or bringing it back from the dead and hearing it come to life again is pretty neat. I really feel that in a way pianos are living, breathing things. They respond to deterioration from time, they're sensitive to humidity, they're always changing. Every one of these pianos has a story. So many of them have been all over the country. It's amazing. It was often the thing people took with them when they moved, even though they're so heavy. And I think the fact that a piano is so heavy really anchors it in people's lives. And same with the hearse, these things live on in our lives. It's really neat, the stories and the things that we go through. Whereas we can heal from things that happen to us in life, the pianos generally don't, without somebody fixing them. So it's amazing how much can happen to something in a lifetime. And I get to kind of uncover that working on them.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits, 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.